Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, back with another video on Total War Warhammer. This time, instead of talking about potential future content or some desired rework, there's a small nitpick I have with 3 legendary lords that I think needs to be resolved. One of the things that really makes characters into these mythical titans is their unique items, that not only grants all sorts of fun abilities, but helps inform small pieces of their identities. What would Karl Franz be without Gal Maraz, Thorgrim without the Damas Kron, or Tyrion without the dragon armor of Anarion? So where am I going with this? Well, there are 3 legendary lords currently in Total War Warhammer 3 who are missing important items. Bizarrely, each of them has these items visible on their in-game models, but they don't have a representing unique item or skill. That should be rectified as soon as possible. So let's start with the horrifying god of mutation in the room. Morghur the Shadowgave is one of the most interesting legendary lords in Total War for a myriad of reasons. He's actually one of the very few characters who has the distinction of being a major force in the Beasts of Chaos 6th edition book to a significantly more minor role in the Beastmen 7th edition army book. He was downgraded from a terrifying lord to an interesting but much weaker hero. The reason for this wasn't that he was retconned or weakened from a lore standpoint, but instead that the 7th edition Beastmen book altered its focus to almost purely upon those children of chaos in the Empire at the expense of ignoring the rest of the world. As Morghur is the primary antagonist of the Wood Elves, he fell into the background, which led to the lessening of his role from a lord to a hero. Furthermore, his point cost fell significantly, so roughly half of his abilities and all of his items were stripped away to reduce the Shadowgave's impact on the tabletop. Ultimately, this doesn't matter much for Total War, as they have established a good pattern of using the information from multiple editions when crafting the special characters we all love to ensure they appear as their best selves. Morghur is a tad tricky, however, as his original 6th edition version, which is by far his best one, is obscenely powerful if translated directly into Total War. An unbreakable, regenerating lord who is virtually immune to shooting and spells with a constant damage aura, ability to make woods deal damage to those inside them, and an impressive infinite range auto rally leadership ability. And I haven't even talked about his items yet. He truly was running around the battlefields like a chaos god actually having come to tabletop. However, while this is a strong cautionary tale to keep an eye on Morghur in multiplayer to ensure he doesn't become too efficient for his cost, we have no such limitations in campaign. Morghur is missing the following skills and items. Firstly, he should be able to acquire the Unbreakable rule from his skill tree, as every iteration of Morghur has that as a core rule of his design. This could simply be added to his Touch of Corruption skill at the end of his personal skill tree. That way you're not able to get it too early, or it could just be added as like in that kind of top row where they only have a little individual space and just have Unbreakable unlock at, I don't know, level 20 or something. Next is the ability The Beast Roar, which speaks of how Morghur is capable of unleashing a piercing, unearthly, and warping roar that resounds through the forest, drawing beastmen to his call. This ability should grant a solid leadership bonus to all friendly beastmen on the field. Perhaps it could be a passive that just constantly grants a small bonus while Morghur is alive, or it could be an active ability that briefly grants a more potent boost to give those beastmen who are fleeing or wavering a much higher chance of rallying. Kind of similar to Grombrindal's Grombrindal Knows No Fear ability, where he can buff, nearby dwarfs and stuff like that. I kind of envision something like that. But it's an important aspect of his character. In the Wood Elves 8th edition stories, we actually get a story about Morghur using that beast roar to basically draw in allies, which almost leads to Erloth and all of his buddies getting massacred. So it's an important aspect of his character and has remained constant. so he should have a skill that references it. Lastly are his missing items. Have you ever wondered why one of Morghur's main epithets is the Master of Skulls? The answer to this is revealed on his in-game model, where you may notice that his hair and all around him has numerous skulls woven into it. Already unsettling enough, Morghur's sheer corruptive presence causes these skulls to gibber and screech constantly, like me playing Legendary mode. A terrifying promise that even death is no escape from the chaotic power of the Shadowgave. This effect is represented by the item called the Skull Weave, which grants Morghur the Terror special rule and also distracts opponents trying to strike him in close combat. So, what it should do in game is, in addition to granting terror, it should also lower the melee attack of anyone engaged in combat with Morghur himself. I think that would be a perfectly reasonable new passive ability. The final item is the Stones of the Skull Cave, which traditionally was combined with his staff or stave, which he does actually have in game, but the Stones of the Skull Cave don't seem to be represented within its rules and abilities. The Skull Cave is Morghur's lair, a bizarre cavern where the mutative aura of the Shadowgave has caused the very stone to run like melted wax in an endless process of transformation. The stones taken from Skull Cave wreak havoc on enemy wizards as they cause the winds of magic to become far more unstable and dangerous. As such, the Stones of Skull Cave should simply grant Morghur an ability in campaign where any wizards, maybe in his region or just in a battle with him, have significantly higher chances of enemy wizards miscasting. I think I said that weirdly, but you get the point. So that wraps up the Beastman Legendary Lord. So those two items and those two abilities would, I think, really finish him and make him the experience that he should be. So now our attention must turn to the burning sands of the southern desert. The Tomb Kings not only have a character missing some important goodies, but in fact, two characters missing items. We'll start with the more complicated of the two, as it's a rather curious situation. Grand Hierophant Khatep, everyone's favorite exiled DJ, is short a few skills that are quick to cover, so that is an ideal starting place. He should have the Loremaster skill for the lore of Nehekhara. He has it in tabletop. But that skill is nowhere to be seen for some reason on his skill tree, which is genuinely odd. Traditionally, Creative Assembly enjoys handing out that skill, even to characters that aren't supposed to have it, so it's quite odd to see the opposite. So, let's get that added onto a skill tree. Next up, as the Grand Hierophant, Khatep is supposed to always be the army's Hierophant, which is an actual army mechanic for Tomb Kings that unfortunately has been left out of Total War thus far, though there are reasons for it. A Hierophant is supposed to be the most powerful caster in a Tomb King army who wields the lore of Nehekhara, as essentially he was the individual in charge of resurrecting the undead, making up the army, and ensuring they stay in one piece. For the way the Total War games work, they decided to not do this because it would basically force you to have a Hierophant in each army like it did in tabletop. But, Total War doesn't want to force you to bring a Nehekhara wizard always, especially as you would basically be pigeonholed into taking a Lich High Priest of Nehekhara as your general in every army. And it just doesn't work well. So I think it's totally fine they scrapped the Hierophant as a requirement. However, I do think that they should still have the Hierophant able to be something you can get just because it's a good callback to the tabletop. So I think the way to do that would be for Khatep and the Lich High Priests, which are the Lord level wizards, which we will hopefully one day get, is that they should be able to acquire a skill on their skill tree that's unique to the Lords, which is called Hierophant, which should simply grant regeneration. As one of the big benefits to selecting a wizard to be your Hierophant is that he acquired the regeneration rule, which is really awesome and powerful. For Khatep himself, they should just add the regeneration to his Grand Hierophant skill at the end of his unique personal skill tree. I think this would be a nice way to further separate the eventual Lich High Priests from the regular High Priests, while also giving those Lord level wizards a bit more survivability, because having a Wizard Lord is always kind of a bit more of a risk when you could have, a Tomb King running around on a War Sphinx. So I think it's something that bears considering. I will note real quick that alternatively, they could do something a little different with the Hierophant ability, because it did actually grant regen not only to the wizard, but also the unit he was in. But I'm not sure how that could be well implemented. Like, maybe it could be an ability instead of just passive regen. So like a very, very short range power that he's able to activate, like that's maybe 20 meters or 30 meters, probably like 10 or 20 meters, that grants like some very small amount of healing, but they're able to use it consistently or something like that. I don't know. I would probably just make it regular regen on the wizard themselves. But anyway, moving on. Finally, on to Khatep's missing item. As I said earlier, Khatep has a very bizarre situation in that while he has the Lich Staff, the item doesn't do what it's supposed to do. The Lich Staff is an arcane item meant to increase Khatep's casting ability and make his spells more reliable. While the campaign-specific aspects of the staff are fine, where it grants you like increased magic drop chance and lower chance of miscasting, yada yada, the passive ability it grants, which adds cooldowns to enemy characters, makes absolutely no sense. To accurately represent the item, the Lich Staff's passive ability should be something like it's an active ability instead that grants Khatep notable spell mastery, for instance, while the ability is active. Or it should increase his ability to draw on the winds of magic. Personally, I think the ability to give your spells something like 50 to 100% extra power through spell mastery for 10 to 20 seconds with like a 2 to 3 minute cooldown would suit very nicely. You could make a lot of those spells really oomph with some extra power. But what about what the staff currently does? This admittedly helpful / frustrating ability, depending on which side of it you're on, to add a 15-second cooldown to the enemy whenever Khatep casts a spell. Well, that is actually much more accurately representing Khatep's other item, which currently has been left out of the game, the Scroll of the Cursing Word. This spooky item is said to cause those it is unleashed upon to find their mouths suddenly full of dung beetles and their lungs scorched by burning sands. So, for some reason, Creative Assembly during Khatep's design decided to give him only his staff while making said staff perform the scroll's ability. This should be rectified as soon as possible. Let DJ Khatep have both of his items. The poor guy's earned it. If there's any concern about the fact that both items are technically arcane items, which this has happened with other characters and been resolved, is just make the Lich Staff into counting as a magic weapon instead of an arcane item, or make the scroll count as an enchanted item instead of an arcane item. Problem solved. And then last, but certainly not least, is none other than Settra the Imperishable, the Kimbrikara, King of Kings, and countless other titles that I won't have time to recite because, we all want to move on with our lives. Everyone knows that Settra is the main star of the Tomb Kings as a race, the poster child for showcasing the well-earned arrogance of the Desert Kings. So, it's a bit strange to notice that the Imperishable is missing one of his items, and it's an extremely important one because it's kind of what makes him imperishable. See, one of the most unique and badass things about Settra is that despite being undead and a novice wizard, the Kimbrikara is able to go toe-to-toe with the great necromancer Nagash and not be dominated. One of the most powerful sorcerers in the Warhammer world, facing Nagash mano-a-mano is an incredible feat, something nearly impossible to do without a near mastery of magic. And yet, Settra has whooped up on Nagash multiple times, and Nagash cannot go into Nehekara because he is scared of Settra. So how does Settra accomplish this? Well, it's thanks to arguably his most powerful artifact, the Scarab Brooch of Usirian. This enchanted amulet protects Settra with the godly power of Usirian, the Nehekaran god of the underworld, and renders him essentially immune to hostile magics. Frankly, it protects him from damn near everything, and on tabletop was by far the most powerful item of Settra due to that absolutely obscene 4+ ward save on a special character who had a bunch of other nasty buffs. In game, I think it should grant Settra increased magic resistance, which it did as well in tabletop, and it should also do things like reduce enemy hero success chance in his region and other defensive buffs, in the campaign specific like passive abilities. In battle, it should grant him a new active ability that when used gives Settra the Imperishable a sizable ward save for some chunk of time. Perhaps 20% damage resistance for like 20 seconds? I don't know. Someone smarter than me in regards to game design will figure that part out. Alternatively, if they just wanted to make it where the item just gives him stats and doesn't give him like a new passive or active, that way it wouldn't affect him in multiplayer, it would only affect him in campaign, that would be fine too. But it should give him a hefty ward save. And if it's going to be campaign only, I think that justifies making it even better than it was or would be as an active ability. Because, who cares how powerful something is in campaign? Go crazy with it. In any event, that wraps up the notable missing items and skills for Legendary Lords in Total War Warhammer 3. If there's any items or skills you think are missing that I should know about or talk about in the future, please do let me know, especially down in the comments. Hopefully, Creative Assembly can get these 3 of their missing tidbits sometime soon. CA is collecting reports and feedback about bugs or concerns in the Steam forums. So maybe if we all kind of got together and pointed out that these 3 characters need these little things, maybe, just maybe, they could put it on their to-do list. Might not be done for 2.4 or 3.0, but maybe it could show up in like 3.1 or something. Most of these wouldn't actually require much in the way of new assets or anything, so hopefully it should, or actually, I don't think any of them would require anything terribly new. So presumably it would be easy to do, but, we'll have to see. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Also, CA, please, for the love of Thra and all the desert gods, buff the Chariot of the Gods to be better than a Cimmerian War Sphinx. Please. It doesn't deserve to be this bad. Please!